Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Today I'm going to talk about a pen that I was very excited to hear about. This is a Moonman or Majohn V60. It is a clone of a very iconic pen, the Omas 360, which came out in 1996. And they stopped making it 10 years later when Omas stopped being in existence. It's actually been kind of reinvigorated or recreated. The people at Narval bought Omas, and I think they are eventually going to reintroduce the 360. But before they did that, this Chinese company came out with this clone for around $30. It depends on where you get it. I got mine at AliExpress for under $30. And what's exciting about it and different about it is its triangular form. The original 360 I got very excited about when I saw a review by Doodlebud, who bought one, and I wanted to get my hands on one. But you can spend $600-700, even more, for a original Omas 360. So although this is a clone of another pen, it is a pen that you can't actually buy new. So it doesn't have the same sort of moral issues about it. So I'm going to review it. I think, again, to think of this review as a first impression of the pen. There's been already quite a lot of controversy about it, that some people really like it. Doug of Inquiring Minds hates it. And I think one of the problems with pen reviews is that they come out too quickly, and people want to get out what the word is about a pen, but you really have to live with a pen for several months. Also, it just turns out that sometimes with fountain pens from all different manufacturers, I will get a great pen from a manufacturer and somebody else will get a lemon. In this case, my version of the pen seems terrific. I have had none of the problems that Doug had with it. I actually even like the nib on it. But other people may have different experiences, and what I'm going to do, I hope, is maybe in a month or so do a follow-up to see if the pen lives up to my expectations, and I may even get another version of it to sort of take it apart. Doug really objected to the fact that you couldn't take this pen apart. But keep in mind that the original Omas 360 wasn't easy to take apart. And the same is true of a lot of very expensive pens, like the Mont Blanc 149 is not meant for the typical user to take apart. So I'm not quite sure how fair that is as an aspect of a review of a particular fountain pen. As always, if this is useful, don't forget to subscribe. So here is the pen. A word about the name of the company. Originally, when the pen company was sort of, at least when I was becoming aware of it, was called Moonman, and a lot of their pens have gotten, I think, actually quite good reviews. I've really enjoyed their pens, but at a certain point, the word got out that Moonman was not a name that they were supposed to be able to use for copyright reasons, and so they changed it to Majohn. And yet they still seem to use Moonman, because right on the pen itself, you can see that it says Moonman. So I don't know what the story is about that. Omas is a brand that Italian pen company that goes all the way back to 1925. It was founded by Armando Simoni. He named the company, actually, it's the initials of Officina Meccanica Armando Simoni. So that's what Omas stands for. They were particularly known for beautiful pens that were made out of celluloid, although the original 360, which was the last sort of major pen design, came out in 1996, and they did make the pen out of resin, but also versions out of celluloid, and I believe even out of titanium. The original pen was designed by Stefano Bini. Now, this is all according to Glenn Marcus, who has a wonderful website, and he writes a lot about Omas and the history of that pen company. I think around 2000, it gets bought up by Moet, and then gets purchased by other people, and it really stops making pens, I think, around 2007, and now has been recently, the name at least, has been bought by Narval, and they are producing new pens under the Omas brand. When I was at a recent pen show, I spoke to the representative there and even said to them, when are you going to come out with a new version of the 360? And they said that they were working on it. I'm sure that they're rather annoyed by this clone, given that possibility. Now, keep in mind when you're thinking about this pen that it doesn't cost that much, right? I am sure. Now, I don't have an Omas 360. Fortunately, there are quite a few reviewers out there, including Doug at Inquiring Minds, who have been able to get a hold of a 360. You can compare it with Doodlebud is another example of that. I am sure, though, however, that given the history of Omas's quality, that it is a better made pen. It certainly has a better nib, gold nib. This pen isn't an exact duplicate. It's missing the band here, although the clip is very similar. I was surprised when I got mine how initially, at least, how beautiful it is. I was very impressed by the polish. It shines, it feels very nice in the hand. Where you see that it is, the issues of quality, I think, really come where it comes to the piston. This is a piston filler pen, which is, surprising given the fact it's triangular. You could see how they could much more easily have done this with a converter in it, but they chose to keep the piston design, and that's kind of unusual to turn a piston that has this triangular form. The original pen was called 360 because the triangle that it's based on has 3 angles of 60 degrees. The concept is to make you or force you to hold the pen in a particular way. In that sense, it's a little bit like the Lamy pen, which section is triangular, which forces your fingers to hold it in a particular way. Supposedly, Omas was getting all kinds of complaints about pens, and they realized that people weren't holding the pen in a particular way that they thought you're supposed to hold it, and this pen makes you do that. And I suppose that would make it, in a way, ergonomic. I find that it's not so much the triangular form that might be an issue with the pen, and it's triangular all the way through. It has a slip cap. Obviously, it can't turn because it's not round, and the section is triangular but quite fat. Look at the difference between the section on the Safari, and I found that this kind of tired my hands after a while. My initial reaction when I held the pen in my hands was that, boy, this does feel really nice, but the more I wrote with it, the more I found it tiring because it's fairly substantial and heavy pen, and so that might be an issue for people. One of the good things, though, about the pen is that it kind of lets you try this out without having to spend $700 on a used version of the 360, right? So I think that's a kind of service. Fit and finish really become an issue at the point in which the piston here is that your hand does tend to go to this, and notice that it doesn't quite fit together perfectly. When it's closed, there's a bit of air like line. You can see sort of through the pen to the other side. I imagine that the original pen fit better than this does. Certainly, if you've got a celluloid version, it's going to feel more expensive. But for $30, I am very impressed by this pen. Now, one thing I didn't do is try to take it apart at all. And this is where Doug of Inquiring Minds got into trouble. He really felt like he really couldn't take it apart, or broke the pen when he tried to take it apart. Now, you have to keep in mind that so many pens that come from China and other places use sort of interchangeable parts. And there's a lot of discussion online, in fact, about, the different pen companies that are coming from Asia, and are they using the same supplier, etc. But if you have a form factor like this, you can't do that, right? And so there are reasons why you might make a pen like this, but not make it easy to take apart, because it has to fit together again once you put it back together, so that for example, that the piston end comes together perfectly and it lines up. And all of that is tricky to do. And it is for this reason that the original Omas 360 supposedly did not easily come apart. Now, that doesn't quite explain why the front of the pen, the nib, perhaps could have screwed out more easily and allowed you to clean it. But as I said before, Mont Blanc's 149 is not, you can't do that either with that pen. So it's not so unusual for very high-end pens to be created in such a way that they have to be serviced outside. I am going to get another one of these and use it to experiment on. I know that other reviewers were able to get the nib out, and because they wanted to use a different nib on the pen, and they were able to do that. But in terms of easily taking the pen apart so that you can clean it, that's not so easy to do with this pen. Keep in mind, in the old days, not in the 90s, but certainly before World War II with vintage pens, most people kept the same ink color in a pen. And it's really only until the late 90s when people become obsessed with all the different ink colors. So if you keep the same ink color in the pen, there's no reason why you need to take it apart really and clean it out that much. And you certainly can use the old-fashioned way of just using the piston, filling it with water, and then doing that many times to clean it out. So that's something to keep in mind. To me, a pen that costs $30, it doesn't bother me so much that I can't take it apart. I don't, for example, take my Pelican pens apart to clean them. But the nib comes out, and so that makes them easier to clean. It would be better if you could do that. Another thing that's a pain with this design is that it doesn't have an ink window. And that's true of the original Omas design. And that makes it mysterious whether or not, there's ink in it. And I think that's a problem with a piston filler pen, that you can't tell if there's how much ink is left in it. And a lot of piston fillers let you, have some kind of a ink window so you can see the amount of ink in it. Now, there's some discussion, does this pen post? Well, at least my version of the pen posts, and quite securely, but you will notice that it sits on the piston. And as I've always said, a pen that posts but sits on the piston is dangerous because it's very easy to inadvertently turn it and then let ink out. So I would not recommend posting this pen. All manufacturers, I think, who make piston pens, like Pelican, they should be aware of this. Pelican's pens, when you post them, you don't turn the piston, but other pens I know do, and it's something which is a pet peeve of mine. Anyway, I would not recommend posting this pen because when you post it, it becomes ridiculously long. It's not really meant for that. And also, I think you're much more likely to scratch it given how tightly it fits on the end of the pen. You'll notice that the design is this Greek inspired design. A lot of the Omas pens have a kind of Greek inspiration. As Glenn Marcus talks about how the original founder was, I think, Italian, but of Greek descent. There's a long history of Italy and Greece, the Etruscans, et cetera, et cetera. Italy was a colony initially of Greece in the ancient times. So there is a long connection between Italy and Greece, and these fountain pen designs, I think, sort of celebrate that. One problem is the clip. The clip is way too tight. It looks just like the Omas clip. My guess is that the Omas clip is more usable. I wish I had the Omas 360 to compare it to, but I am sure that it probably is better for this. I like to clip my pens to my shirt pocket. This is a little scary, but it's so tight that you might do damage. So I suppose what you could do is to gently bend it back and forth to try to loosen it a little bit. That might help. It's a fairly substantial pen. It has ink in it. So with ink in it, it's about 29.5 grams. The cap is actually quite heavy. So without the cap, you lose 10 grams. So it's almost 20 grams without the cap. It's quite a large pen. It's almost 6 inches long. Now, the 360 came in many different versions, and there was a Magnum version that was even bigger than this pen. Just to give you an idea of how long and big it is, the Mont Blanc 149, which is a very substantial pen, this is a version actually from the 70s, is not quite as big as this. It's a fatter pen, but it is not as long as this pen. The Lamy Safari, which is also a very long pen, is shorter than this pen. And here is the Pilot Metropolitan, just to give you an idea of different size pens here. How does it write? This is the Moonman or Majohn V60, and this is Diamine Oxblood, which is a nice kind of reddish brown that I very much like. This is the fine. Unfortunately, it only comes in an extra fine and a fine, although I think there's some companies that are advertising that they will do a different grind or smoother version of these nibs on AliExpress. This is Rhodia paper. Now, when I ordered the pen, I imagined that I would switch the nib because I like mediums and broads, and I would simply switch the nib. But I am very surprised at how nice this nib is and how smooth and nicely it writes. It even has just a little bit of flex to it, tiny bit. So it's not quite a nail. It actually reminds me a lot of some Schmidt nibs. It has a little bit of feedback, but it's very pleasant, and it's very wet, or nicely wet, just the right amount of wetness. So I found no skipping. It writes really well, very fast, no skipping. And it's much more like a Western fine. In fact, this would be definitely like a Pilot medium, which very much pleased me. So I have no desire actually to change this nib. But I know that other people have had many different experiences. What I would say is that initially I enjoy writing with it, but this width of this section it's really just too wide for me, and it tires my hand. What else can I say about it? It is, I think, very handsome. I am pleased with it so far, but time will tell whether it holds up. If this has been useful for you and you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe. It's free and it's the best way to support this channel.